In terms of the market size for the key component industry elements, which is where a lot of requirement of skilled manpower in the manufacturing domain is required, we will see a significant traction in electric motors, batteries, power electronics, and also charging stations as we move forward. I believe, in terms of the, if I look at the few key trends, about a third of the EV motor market will emerge from the demands in EV buses in India because they need a significant quantum of batteries. 67% will be the passenger car segment, and 61% will be the two-wheeler segment share in power electronics market in 2025.
So while our attendees are just pouring in, I'll just quickly begin the session. Welcome to the Blue Circle. It's such a big privilege and pleasure to connect with everyone and our distinguished keynote speaker who is handpicked because of the thick input and the rich experience he brings in. Thank you also to our distinguished audience for joining us, most of whom are CEOs, CXOs, and senior leaders. Many of them are our members and are repeat visitors to our webinars. This is very encouraging and motivates us to provide even higher levels of dialogue through the online mode as well. For those of you who are new with us today, Blue Circle is the world's first sector-specific networking app for business leaders that's built in India. We currently focus on 20 sector communities such as e-mobility, renewable energy, real estate, healthcare, and many more. We also present socioeconomic insights, which ultimately determine the evolving complexion of the market. Along with our weekly webinar series and our digital publication, you will be happy to know that we have recently launched the first version of the Blue Circle app for leaders, somewhat like the sector-specific LinkedIn for senior leaders, a space to have meaningful conversations, connect with over 11,000 plus like-minded leaders from India and across the globe, house high-quality curated content, and access business opportunities across these sectors. Those leaders among you who are interested, please join us. I will share the link to the app in the chat section. I will soon be sending out invitations to our new guests post today's discussion. Now, without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce today's keynote speaker, Mr. Arindam Lahiri, CEO, Automotive Skill Development Council of India. He's a passionate professional with a career spanning 28 years. The initial 10 years was spent in the manufacturing sector, followed by 18 years of experience across all domains of education and training. He started his career with Maruti Udyog, received global exposure at Honeywell at US, and had an entrepreneurial stint as a director and co-founder at Career Launcher India. His last assignment was the education division of HD Media. And for today's topic, Mr. Lahiri will be discussing cluster-based skilling approach to provide skilled manpower in e-mobility manufacturing. I request Mr. Lahiri to please begin the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gautam. It's always a pleasure to be back in discussion with the Blue Circle community. And those of you who've taken time out and joined the conversation today, thank you very much. Appreciate your joining us today in this session. E-mobility is taking shape in India, and I think many of us who are part of these discussions are really privileged to be part of this massive transition that is happening in the transportation sector, in the mobility sector, in the automotive sector, as we may want to call them. And we see a tremendous change or transformation management that's happening across the board, and skilling, reskilling and upskilling of individuals are at a center stage and at a very critical input to the whole process of skilling in this kind of a scenario. So what I'll do is, based on the theme that we have here today for our discussion, where we are looking at cluster-based skilling approach to provide skilled manpower in EV manufacturing. So essentially, we are restricting our discussions today on cluster-based skilling, and also in terms of specific requirements on the manufacturing domain of electric vehicles. While we would probably touch upon some of the other areas as well, but largely we are going to focus on what we have stated out in terms of the topic for discussion today. As I think all of you would be quite aware that we have a pretty spread out auto cluster in India, while East is a very small presence as far as the automotive industry is concerned. North, West, and South, I think, are all very strong clusters. West being one of the oldest in terms of the Pune cluster, let's say, with the newer clusters in Delhi, NCR, Uttarakhand, and down south we have the Chennai, Hosur, Bangalore. Uh, though there are newer opportunities that are coming up in Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu border as well, maybe near Sri City and other geographies there. So we do have a fairly spread out auto cluster, and my sense is that as EVs kind of get more popular, it will be that they will also get structured around some of these existing clusters, though we cannot rule out the formation of newer clusters at this point in time. So if I look at a fairly 30,000 feet scenario of what's happening currently in the EV industry in India, we're seeing a lot more traction. Which is definitely aligned with global trends, but with a different segmental mix, because India has a fairly unique segmental mix, even in the IC engine industry itself, in automotive. So we see a tremendous growth that is happening, led by the two-wheeler and the three-wheeler segments, while four-wheeler e-bus segments are driven largely by the government push for clean mobility, especially when we are looking at public transportation system facilitated by adoption of electric buses. These are all, pushed by our commitment to the Paris Climate Change Agreement, and also the subsequent policy initiatives that has been taken both at the central level and of course at the state EV policies. And these state EV policies are going to play a very instrumental role in terms of our approach to figuring out which are those areas which are likely to have more clusters for EV manufacturing as we go ahead. Of course, there is this tremendous pressure on India's economy in terms of being able to reduce India's oil imports, and along with e-mobility being a prime driver for that kind of an initiative. I think there are a couple of other alternate fuel options that India is exploring quite actively. In terms of the market forecast, even for 2025 kind of a scenario, it looks like it will be predominantly be driven by e-rickshaws, e-autos, and e-two-wheelers. This will be supported by passenger cars and e-buses, but we do definitely see a significant multiplier of growth between 2019-20 to 2025 in terms of the growth in adoption of electric vehicles in the Indian market. In terms of the market size for the key component industry elements, which is where a lot of requirement of skilled manpower in the manufacturing domain is required, we will see a significant traction in electric motors, batteries, power electronics, and also charging stations as we move forward. I believe, in terms of the, if I look at the few key trends, about a third of the EV motor market will emerge from the demands in EV buses in India, because they need a significant quantum of batteries. 67% will be the passenger car segment, And 61% will be the two-wheeler segment share in power electronics market in 2025, given the larger number of units that are expected to happen in the electric two-wheeler space. If I look at some of the maturity, manufacturing maturity levels across the four broad areas of segments of an automobile, body design, body parts, as we say, energy source, electric propulsion, which includes electric motors, transmission wheels, and auxiliaries, including brakes, steering, temperature control, energy management, etc. If we look at this scenario, if we look at this graph, we do see that as far as body and some of the auxiliary elements, which are predominantly common between IC engine vehicles and electric vehicles, they are pretty well established. Some of the other areas in terms of temperature control, energy management, I think are moderately established. We need some more adjustments and more sophistications to be applied to the automotive context. Definitely the area on energy source and electric motors, controllers, power converters, electric vehicle drivetrains are areas which are new business opportunities in India, and which is where probably a significant amount of skilled manpower is also going to be engaged with as we go forward. Battery being a very significant part of the vehicle, obviously a lot of attention is paid to what is some of the developments that are happening. So we do see some action happening down south in Telangana and also on the west in Gujarat, driven by some Indian and international companies coming together to be able to set up lithium-ion battery manufacturing capacities. Some more have already since been announced. This one is a study which was done in towards the end of 2020. So 2021 has also seen a few more additions that have happened into this. Almost all states have come up with their state level EV policies, and there are various elements of those policies which are very critical from a perspective of both EV adoption as well as from an EV manufacturing perspective. And if I look at the manufacturing side of it, we would need to see these policies in the light of specifically 8 specific parameters that I would want to highlight here. One is on capital subsidies that are offered by various states for the industry development, tax exemptions, land development incentives, infrastructure concessions, especially around power tariffs, etc., subsidies around that, battery recycling incentives, employment incentives, skill development initiatives, and R&D initiatives. And of course, for us, what will become most critical to look at is, are there any opportunities or skill development initiatives that some of these states have already announced, and is it something that we can plug in as a council in terms of accelerating the adoption of the various skill development programs that we are already working on, maybe in those states or in other areas. So this is a quick mapping of a few of the EV state policies, and if you look at the skill development initiatives, I think almost all states have had a very explicit support for the skill development initiative. Some of them haven't spelled it out as clearly, but I'm pretty sure overall in terms of the adoption of EV itself, this is going to play a very critical part, especially when we are looking at setting up EV manufacturing facility. And there, I think this parameter will play a very, very important and critical role. What is also heartening to see in this particular chart is that there's a whole lot of effort around R&D initiatives around EV, because to my mind, the manufacturing of IC engine was focused largely only on manufacturing, while EV will be more an interplay of research and development and manufacturing in terms of the making of electric vehicles in this particular country. In terms of the skill development initiatives, Delhi, I think, has focused on the service sector within EV, largely around charging station operations, maintenance of vehicles, etc. Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh have specifically spoken about reskilling allowances or stipends. Uttarakhand has specific provision for training reimbursement assistance. And 4 other states, Punjab, Maharashtra, Kerala, Madhya Pradesh, has specifically talked about skilling initiatives through various skill ecosystem players around ITI, skill development centers, as well as technical universities in these states itself. And therefore, as you would rightly see here, that a number of states have already given enough importance to this whole focus around cluster-based skilling for the clusters of EV that they are trying to look at developing in these states. I would like to now, move on to the last piece of my presentation today, and then we can open it up for question and answer. What are some of the stuff that we at ASDC have been doing? We have a large number of qualifications that we have already approved through our government approval process, which is the National Skill Qualifications Committee, on all the various areas, both manufacturing, assembly, research, development, as well as technical service and repair. We've also started conducting training of trainers, which we have initiated in 2021 itself when we started doing the first batch. We have a partnership with Toyota Kirloskar where we are offering a free e-learning program, and this has already been taken. By February, it's about close to 25,000 participants who've gone through this, who registered for this program, and close to about 8,000 certificates have been generated. We have quite a wide spectrum of new partners that we've already partnered with in terms of offering various programs that they have designed, largely focused on upskilling and reskilling initiatives, either on a pure online mode or on a blended mode that we have started looking at. There are various opportunities, and industry could also plug in these kind of initiatives. We're looking at upskilling of existing independent market mechanics. We're starting a pilot in Central Delhi and Jaipur district as a pilot for this two-wheeler market mechanics. We have already launched mobile-based learning content access to our partner Mechanic TV on the new emission standard. We are looking at a similar content for EV related. We are also looking at setting up of a dedicated training of trainer and assessor academy in partnership with NSDC industry partner and an academic institution. We already are in various levels of discussion with a number of our existing and new upcoming automotive centers of excellence across the country, in Gujarat, in Kerala, in Maharashtra, and we are actively looking at various opportunities to do that. So I'll stop here, and I'll be very happy to take more specific questions. So over to you, Gautam, and we'll be happy to answer some of those questions.
Mr. Lahiri, thank you so much. It was very enlightening to hear all your thoughts. I'll just quickly jump into the questions which we've already received, while we'll start receiving questions in our Q&A section. So the first question is for detailed questions asked by Mr. S. Manish Singh. He's the Managing Director at Fraudulence Capability Development. I'll go step by step, so I'll ask you one question at a time. The first question is, which is divided into 3 parts. Is there a primary level detailed skills gap study done and a dynamic formal information system in place to estimate the number of skilled people required in each area of EV manufacturing and which skills are in demand? This is the first part. Second is, how recently was it updated? And lastly, does it outline the factors that will impact this demand going further, and what triggers or indicators to monitor for the same?
Right.
Over to you.
So, yeah, I think there are a large number of various reports that are available on EV skills requirements and also uh, kind of juxtaposed to how the technology is evolving. Uh, Without listing out all of them, I'll probably refer to some of them. We have had a skill gap study that we initiated way back in 2019 itself, which included a very specific study around electric vehicles. One of our parent organizations, ACMA, has done a very detailed study in partnership with the Bank Foundation on EV component manufacturing area and skills required in 2020. 2021, we've had a couple of reports that have come out between 2021 and 2022 with Ola Mobility Institute as well as
Lahiri, just one
BATS,
minute.
WRI, etc. Sorry.
Can you put your mic a little closer to your? Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Is that better?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So a large number of these are already available in the public domain, and we could share that individually with these people if we get to know their reach out address. Overall, as far as EV skilling is concerned, the skilling will be required in the R&D domain, in manufacturing, certain areas which are new from, which are different from, let's say, IC engine vehicles, which is largely around electronics, battery motors. Otherwise, many of the other body parts and moving parts are going to be the same, reasonably same, with some obviously modifications that will keep happening. And also in the after sale service, because there will be more diagnosis replacement service rather than a repair service that typically is much more prevalent in case of IC engine vehicles. As far as other areas within our domain, which we talk about, which is sales and driving, I think a basic sensitization around electric vehicle is required, but the fundamental skills in those kind of subsectors are not likely to change significantly enough. So I hope I've been able to answer that question.
Yes, I think it was covered quite extensively. Thank you. I'll move on to the next question. He asks, are we differentiating between incremental jobs against the demand for skills addressed by upskilling or reassigning existing workers?
Yeah, so I think there are three kinds of jobs that we are looking at. One is that with the gradual phasing out or decrease in volume of IC engine vehicles, there will be some jobs which will go out of fashion, and probably already existing people in that domain are the ones who will likely to continue till the end of cycle for that kind of job roles. Then there are job roles which are going to remain in the EV space as well, but they are going to have some significant input because the way the vehicle is designed and the vehicle behaves is going to be significantly different from IC engine, and therefore there will be areas. So areas around braking system, wheel systems, etc., will remain fundamentally same, but they will have to accommodate for the way the wear and tear and all that happens in terms of electric vehicles vis-a-vis the IC engine vehicles, weight distribution issues, etc., which battery, because battery has a significant amount of weight, especially when we are talking about commercial vehicles like buses, etc. And the third is, absolutely new areas which are largely around power electronics, or electronic controls that are there. So you must remember that when we talk about electric vehicle, we are also talking about a whole lot of associated development, which could have been there even in the case of IC engine vehicle, but that development is happening concurrent with the electric vehicle adoption process, and automotive electronics is a case in point. And therefore, other new areas like battery management systems, thermal management around battery heat generated, charging issues, softwares around that, diagnostics around that are new skills, completely new skills that we are doing.
True, very true. Yes, thank you. I'll move on to the next question, which is a two-part. He asks, is there a publicly shared updated map for displaying geographical areas of demand dynamically so that the training systems can align accordingly? If yes, how is this being shared and where can this be accessed?
So there are maps available which talks about the current manufacturers of electric vehicles, but one must remember that this is very dynamic and this keeps changing. So there wouldn't be a single point in terms of that availability. My sense is that the production linked incentive in manufacturing that has been launched by the Ministry of Heavy Industries as it gets underway, which has a heavy focus or significant focus on electric vehicle and its components. My sense is that within the Ministry of Heavy Industry itself, you should be able to track how these geographies, or these companies in their geographies are actually progressing as we go forward.
True. So I'll just quickly get on to the next question. We're getting a lot of questions in our Q&A section. And we'll just quickly try to summarize all the questions and answers. Do aspiring candidates have information on where the demand is and at what average salary levels? If yes, how is this being shared and where can this be accessed?
In our own way at ASDC, we do accumulate that information in our microsite, which is around career guide, which can be accessed through our website, and also it can be accessed in any Indian language. But at the same time, it's again a very dynamic field, and learners themselves on their own really do not reach out. So we have to do a lot of reach out activities. So in partnership with the ARAI, for instance, we've been reaching out to a large number of academic institutions, although more virtually in today's context because of the pandemic issues. But hopefully now, as things start more opening up, we should be able to do that more in-person or physical sessions along with virtual sessions that we should be able to counsel and guide students through the availability of various experts in these domains who could give some directional sense to these candidates. Salary levels, I think, are very difficult to say as a single number. There's a wide range depending on which function, which geography. It's always going to be very. But I can tell you that there is no dearth of opportunities, job opportunities in this particular space because we don't get enough skilled manpower. And if the person really has skills, the sky is just the limit. Salaries are never a constraint, actually.
So now I'll move on to the next person. It's come from Uma Rao, the VP HR at Ashok Leyland. They've asked, how can industry participate in the skilling efforts of government?
No, I think we are already doing a lot of activity with Ashok Leyland as ASDC is a significant partner. If there are specific interest area in terms of electric vehicle, one of the thoughts that we definitely have and we foresee a challenge is the quality of trainers being available in this ecosystem. And we are trying to form a partnership with various industries in terms of setting up a skill TOT academy, which can take care of the quality of trainers and the training of the trainers that happens, so that they can eventually go down to the various educational and training institutions where they can impart the right skills to these candidates. But if there are any other opportunities that you would want to explore, we'll be more than happy to figure that out.
Great, sure. Thank you. I will surely connect you with Uma Rao after this in case there's any synergies required.
Sure.
A last question before I jump into the Q&A section. It's a little technical, so I'll leave it up to you. The question is, want to know about e-vehicle PMS algorithm and lithium ferrous phosphate battery applications. This has come from a gentleman, Arvind Jail, so professor at Jawaharlal Nehru Engineering College.
So I must honestly admit I'm not an expert in battery chemistry, but I do know that it's a very fascinating domain that one would need to get into. And there are a lot more simulation packages, etc., that are available in terms of having the various BMS algorithms tested out, etc. So if there is a specific requirement, I could try and connect them to other people who are experts in this particular domain and probably would be able to help out the profession.
Great, thank you. So now I'll just quickly jump into the Q&A section. We've got 4 questions. I'll start with the first one by Rakesh Malik. Can regional cluster-based skilling help manufacturing move to smaller cities?
Move to smaller cities. Yeah, see, manufacturing always needs more geographical space, obviously. So regional cluster obviously helps develop a lot of these smaller cities, but it is purely a factor of how the state is essentially giving the support to the industry in terms of adopting that particular geography. So if you look at Gujarat, for instance, 10 years back, I don't think we had any presence as far as automotive industry was concerned, but today it has a very, very, vibrant, vibrant kind of automotive community there, and therefore there is a huge need of skilling activities in very, very small towns, in that entire Sanan, Halol, Kalol, Mehsana belt, which is kind of developed, and that can happen for many other places. I think Andhra Pradesh is also leading the way in terms of attracting more industry into Sri City. And if other states were to also do the same and enable a conducive environment for industry to come, it can surely provide opportunity to the local candidates to work in those factories.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next question. Is from Akshay Yadav. It says international organizations like Bosch are looking to spend 2 billion euros to reskill their workforce for the electric shift. How can cluster approach help?
So I think they are aligned to the various manufacturing clusters that are developing or have already developed to a certain extent. And if the training centers or training locations that they can spend their money on in those clusters is where it will make a significant sense. Unfortunately, many a time some of these training centers are developed at a location which is far away from where the manufacturing activities are, and therefore there is no significant interaction between the real world and the training world. And ultimately, both of them need to, for both of them to thrive, they need to be together. And many countries around the world, which have industrialized countries, not only in electric vehicle, everywhere else.
Mr. Lahiri, I think we've lost you. Kindly allow us a minute, I think. Mr. Lahiri, I think we lost you for a minute there.
Oh, is it okay now?
Yes, it's much better now. Thank you.
Okay. Could you hear the last part, or should I just?
Yes, the last part was.
Yeah. So the last part is, I think, what I'm saying is that across the world in many industrialized nations, there is a precedence that cluster-based approach is what works best, both from the candidate perspective as well as from the industry.
True, very true. Thank you. I'll move on to the next question quickly. It's from Suresh Babu. He has an experience of 30 plus years in the automotive bodybuilding commercial vehicles and is now into EVs with Ghost Drone. That's his background. He wants to ask how to collaborate with government for EV export startups in the 2 and 3 wheeler vehicles. Also for the chassis and frame supplies to OEMs. I believe it's out of subject and topic, but if you would like to address this, I'll leave it up to you.
So I think there are various things. It has to be identified in terms of which state, which location you are wanting to do this, and connect with the state industries department. And they will surely be happy to see if there are funding support, etc., that are available to start your unit and build those export-ready components for use by various customers across the world.
Sure. I'll just take about 2 more minutes of your time and thank you for this. This is a question from Anil Bell. He's asked, what about skilling for the maintenance and servicing of vehicle batteries and the charging systems, as these would be essentially required in the smaller towns of the country?
So I think, we have a very, very strong, robust system of independent, aftermarket mechanics that we talk about, or technicians, service technicians who are there in every block of this country, and even down to the village level. So it is our endeavor through a program like recognition of prior learning, where we look at reskilling them in terms of also being able to handle the battery up to a certain level. And then there could be a hub in each, each district, which should be able to have more specialized manpower who could further do analysis. Also, just remember that when you are talking about battery management systems today, they are also fairly strong in terms of self-diagnostics. So if we enable these mechanics or technicians with the right tools and teach them the techniques, I don't think it will be a big challenge at all over a period of time. But yes, we will have to constantly be at it in terms of being able to reach out to every block level mechanic to be able to upgrade their skills on that. Currently, we are doing a very similar exercise on BS6 engines, which is not related to this. But I would say that that experience would definitely help us as more and more EV adoption happens. We should be able to replicate that with respect to the battery management and the electronic of the vehicle to be managed as well.
I think we're done with the questions, Mr. Hari. Thank you so much for your time. Such an insightful and engaging session, and a privilege to hear you. Our guests and I have been hooked on to the very end, and I've taken home several nuggets. And also thank you for your time, because I know you're in the airport and you're literally short of time. So thank you to our leaders in the audience for joining us and for staying till the very end and for sharing excellent questions as well.
Thank you, Gautam. It's always a pleasure to be part of the Blue Circle, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much. See you soon. Have a safe flight.
Thank you.